Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Ukraine's president makes a plea to UN that Russia must be brought to justice for war crimes. Plus, we have an exclusive from a journalist in Ukraine who paints a different picture of who's committing the crimes. And a Lethbridge school holds Green Shirt Day assemblies as the anniversary of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash approaches.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. The president of Ukraine has told the UN Security Council that Russia's military must be brought to justice immediately for war crimes. Vladimir Zelensky delivered a brutally graphic speech this morning describing the deaths of civilians at the hands of Russian soldiers. That's as NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warned that Russia is regrouping its forces in order to deploy them to eastern and southern Ukraine for what he called a crucial phase of the war.
And as Ukraine faces this new offensive, NATO foreign ministers will discuss what more we will do. Allies are determined to provide further support to Ukraine, including anti-tank weapons, air defense systems, and other equipment. Allies have also increased humanitarian assistance and financial aid. NATO will also look to provide cybersecurity assistance and equipment to help Ukraine protect against chemical and biological threats.
Ukrainian officials are reporting the bodies of at least 410 civilians have been found. NATO is rejecting Russia's claims that the atrocities being revealed in Ukraine were staged. Now, Bridge City News spoke with an independent journalist in Ukraine to hear what they are seeing and experiencing. This morning, I chatted with Christelle Nent, a French national who's been living in the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine, covering the civil conflict in that area for at least 6 years, including this more recent conflict. She says Westerners are not getting the whole story from national and international news outlets. In fact, she says some of the atrocities are being carried out by Ukrainians on other Ukrainians. Have a listen. Russia, of course, is saying that these pictures are staged or fake. So what kind of evidence do you have that they're killed by Ukrainians?
Some videos which were taken by the Ukrainians themselves are posing some problems. The first is that the video taken by some of the forces which had to carry the task of cleaning the city of saboteurs and collaborators of the Russians. You clearly hear one of the soldiers asking to his commander, there are people without the blue armband. So the blue armband is for the Ukrainian forces. The Russian forces wear white armbands. And the civilians in the areas where there are Russians, some of them wear also a white armband to signal, okay, we are not against you, we are not a danger for you. And in this video from the Ukrainian forces, we hear a soldier asking, I see people without the blue, guys without the blue armband, can I shoot at them? And the answer is positive.
Based on what you personally have seen, do you feel that Westerners are getting, both sides are getting the truth of the situation from national and international news outlets? It sounds like not so.
No, not so. There's really a huge bias in international and national media in Western countries, which is really anti-Russian, and it's visible. I found today a video made by a drone from Azov, where they say they see a man being killed by a Russian army on the 3rd of March. But on the 3rd of March, it was snowing. And you see no snow, no wet streets. Moreover, I found another video from the 3rd of March where the Ukrainian soldiers are filmed hanging the Ukrainian flag on Bucha. You see the snow falling, and they said it's the 3rd of March and Bucha is under our control. So how Russians could kill people in Bucha if Bucha was under control of Ukrainian, and on the video you see no wet streets?
Interesting interview. You can catch that full interview with Christelle Nent on Bridge City News Wednesday evening. Just weeks following the alliance of the federal Liberal and NDP parties, the feds announced that their budget will be released this Thursday. But political correspondent Brian Lilley is calling this Canada's very first federal NDP budget.
Well, now that they have this deal with the NDP, we know that there's going to be an awful lot of spending in areas like trying to establish a national pharmacare program, a national dental care program, trying to solidify the childcare agreements. Essentially, they're going to be a federal budget that's mostly about provincial jurisdiction and social programs. That's going to be an awful lot of it, which really makes it more of an NDP type budget than any Liberal budget I've ever covered in the past.
That full interview with Brian Lilley is coming up following business news. At a news conference on Parliament Hill, federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh outlined the priorities he wants to see reflected in the upcoming April 7th federal budget.
In this budget, we want to see first steps on the dental care program. There's so many Canadians that cannot get their teeth fixed, and we want to see first steps and funding for those first steps to start with kids under 12 to get the help they need to be able to look after their teeth. We also want to see help for Canadians that are struggling with the housing crisis. There are so many Canadians that can't afford to ever own a home, who are struggling with their rent, who are hurting now as the cost of living goes up, particularly when it comes to housing. So we want to see help for Canadians now in this budget who are dealing with the housing crisis. Thirdly, another really key element that we fought for and that we want to see happen is steps to make sure that those that have benefited off this pandemic, those at the very top, that some of those start paying their fair share, starting with big banks. That's an important initiative.
Singh also says he'd like to see action on fighting the climate crisis and see an end to fossil fuel subsidies. The Liberals have introduced a bill to support Canadian media outlets. Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez says the legislation is designed to make digital giants like Google and Meta compensate the outlets for reusing their news content. The law will set up a process for digital platforms to privately negotiate deals with newspapers, magazines, digital news groups, and broadcasters that publish news online.
They continue to profit from the sharing and distribution of Canadian news content without really having to pay for it. So with this bill, we're seeking to address this market imbalance. We want to make sure that news outlets and journalists receive fair compensation for their work. We want to make sure that local independent news thrives in our country.
An Alberta archbishop says Pope Francis made it clear to bishops that an apology for the role the Roman Catholic Church played in the residential school system needs to be followed up with concrete action, especially at the local level. Archbishop Richard Smith of Edmonton was part of last week's delegation to the Vatican that included several Indigenous leaders, and he says the Pope's apology was a milestone and is part of a springboard for reconciliation. The Indigenous groups involved in the delegation also requested the church provide reparations, return artifacts, and share any documents about residential schools. Smith says although the pontiff has indicated he intends to visit Canada, nothing will be official until it's announced by the Vatican. A First Nations chief in northern Manitoba says the community has identified the names of 85 children who died while being forced to attend to residential schools run by the Roman Catholic Church. David Monias of the Piachicamek Cree Nation says there were 2 schools that operated in the community, also known as Cross Lake, that were both destroyed by fires. Monias says in a release that St. Joseph's was the main residential school for northern Manitoba. He says the community plans to bring in ground-penetrating radar and review government, medical, and church data. Indigenous Awareness Week is being celebrated at the University of Lethbridge until April 7th. The U of L Art Gallery has a plethora of art from Indigenous artists that is now on display. Micah Quinn has the details on the intricate art.
We hold a collection of over 15,000 works, and a lot of the works in our collection are Indigenous, a lot of First Nations and Inuit pieces.
The program's coordinator for the ULETH Art Gallery, Kirsten Meisinger, says the art gallery pulled out some of the best items from its collection for members of the U of L campus and the public to view the beautiful work completed by Indigenous artists.
If this is a small way that we can expose people to the beauty of things that they've created, then that's important for us.
One of the highlighted pieces of art is called The Delegate Visits Indian Battle Park by Indigenous artist Jeff Thomas.
He came to Blackfoot territory to create a series of works, and he also had an exhibition in our gallery when he was here, and so when he finished, we acquired this piece from him, and it's featuring a Indigenous figurine with our high-level bridge in the background of Lethbridge.
Lindy Shade, the Indigenous Student Services Manager for the U of L, says the events for Indigenous Awareness Week are mostly being held online, but next year the U of L is planning to have more in-person events.
So within our center with the Gascony, we plan through our center, but it's really a university-led event. So we always welcome new partnerships to bring forth any awareness activities, workshops that could really enhance Indigenous Awareness Week.
For more information on the schedule for Indigenous Awareness Week, you can visit the University of Lethbridge's website. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
And there's good news for Indigenous history fans. The Galt Museum and Archives in Fort Whoop-Up are now offering free admission to any Indigenous visitors who want to visit the museum. The CEO and Executive Director of the Galt, Darren Martin, says this is an important step in furthering relationships with Indigenous people.
This initiative was taken as part of our strategic plan, and one of the pillars of our strategic plan is around reconciliation and people, places for all. So these are two very important points, for us in achieving our goals as an institution. There is no expiration date on this, and we look forward to welcoming Indigenous visitors now and far into the future.
The Galt Museum also has 3 Indigenous-led exhibitions that are now on display. Many concerned parents and educators protested the new Alberta draft curriculum at various sites across the province this past weekend, including at Lethbridge City Hall. Mel Lefebvre, a concerned parent, says the fact that many school boards decided to not pilot the draft curriculum speaks volumes.
We've been saying it for years now, since the idea of this draft curriculum came up during the pandemic. So the fact that most school boards refuse to pilot it, and these are all school boards across public education, religious, on reserves, everybody is like, no, we don't approve of this. Professionals have gone into the curriculum and picked it apart and said, okay, well, the way this is mapped out does not make sense.
It was a packed gymnasium this morning at Dr. Gerald B. Proby Elementary School as a group of students oversaw a couple of assemblies teaching about Green Shirt Day and the importance of organ donation. As Angela Stewart explains, the Boulay family says they hope the conversation about organ donation continues past the classroom.
They can take that conversation home to their family. It becomes less intimidating for a family to talk about organ donation.
The grade 2 students at Dr. Proby didn't miss a beat when they stepped into the role of presenter during a Green Shirt Day assembly, the first assembly back after 2 years of COVID-19.
We sang songs, we presented some videos, just so that the students would know about Green Shirt Day.
On April 7th, for the last 4 years, Green Shirt Day is a time to honor those who were tragically killed in the Humboldt Broncos bus crash, including Lethbridge's very own Logan Boulay.
We would have never thought that there would be such a lasting legacy that would happen, or the impact that Logan would have.
And that lasting legacy and the importance surrounding Logan's decision to donate his organs continues to be talked about.
The fact that he did what he did, and that it has resonated so well with Canadians because of the tragedy. We're here to support and push as hard as we can organ and tissue donor registration and awareness across Canada.
Through assemblies like this one, the Boulays say they hope the students will have a better understanding about the importance of organ donation and will continue to have those conversations.
Not a scary subject, not intimidating, not something that's like an ultimate ending to something.
For grade 2 student Tegan Labossiere says that conversation will be something she plans to talk about.
It's important because Miss Belay's son was really kind and thoughtful, and he was only 21 when he died. I want to donate my organs, yes.
For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
Thanks so much, Angela. Well, there's some major construction being done in downtown Lethbridge as a result of receiving $1.71 million from the provincial government's municipal stimulus program. Festival Square is under construction. As Nathan Ryder reports, the square is in the final stages of construction and there's more work being done downtown.
It may not look like a lot right now, but Festival Square is under construction. The square is being built near the intersection of 3rd Avenue and 6th Street South. The square is part of a larger project that will see 3rd Avenue improved from 4th Street to 8th Street. The square will look to bring all sorts of markets and artisans to the area. Crystal Scheidt, the manager for the Festival Square, says the city wanted to help business owners in the downtown area.
I think this was a really good opportunity as we were coming out of the pandemic to really help create a space where people can gather and enjoy the outdoors and really bring in traffic to those downtown businesses that have probably had a tough couple of years.
The square and 3rd Avenue revitalization will bring more foot traffic into the area. Shayla Miller is a stylist at Catwalk Salon and Spa just down the street from Festival Square. She says the square will help all businesses nearby.
Just like having the downtown thrive and build in that kind of way is going to be beneficial for every business downtown. It's going to be beneficial for shopping and supporting local. People walk by, notice the salon. We'll have we always have a sandwich board out there saying like we do take walk-ins. I think a lot of people think that Catwalk doesn't. So I think the more people that are downtown, it's going to help all businesses, including our own.
The project was funded by the Alberta government's municipal stimulus program and will cost $1.71 million. For Bridge City News, I'm Nathan Ryder.
Thanks, Nathan. Lethbridge police are seeking the public's assistance in identifying a woman in connection with a robbery. Just before 3:30 a.m. on March 27th, a man was robbed while walking in the area of 23rd Street and 6A Avenue North. He was assaulted by 2 unknown men who stole his wallet before fleeing on foot. One of his stolen bank cards was then used at 2 nearby businesses by a woman seen through security camera footage. Now, if you're able to identify the woman pictured in the video image there, Lethbridge Police would like to hear from you. Please call 403-328-4444 and reference file number 22006279 or call Crime Stoppers. The association, made up of Alberta's 69 counties and municipal districts, has rejected a proposal planned to create a provincial police force. Premier Jason Kenney said late last year that a provincial force would increase service levels in rural areas, decrease overall policing costs, and increase local input into policing. But Rural Municipalities of Alberta says the model proposed by the United Conservative Party government leaves significant gaps in how it would increase service levels in rural areas. The association says its members have already endorsed a resolution to continue supporting the RCMP in Alberta. In a follow-up to a story we reported yesterday, Alberta's NDP health critic David Shepherd says Premier Jason Kenney's United Conservative government made life difficult for the CEO of Alberta Health Services by interfering in vaccine mandates for health workers. The departure of Dr. Verna Yu was announced Monday, effective immediately, ending a contract that was run until June of 2023. AHS was at the center of debate when the province allowed non-vaccinated frontline health workers to continue to work with testing in order to meet staffing needs. Shepherd also criticized Kenney and Health Minister Jason Copping for failing to come to Yu's defense when some UCP backbenchers accused AHS of failing to respond effectively to the pandemic. Well, we had some gusty winds today, but we didn't see that snow last night as predicted, but we could still see some showers overnight. But good news, we're heading back to the double-digit temperatures. I'll have all the weather details right here for you after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. It was a lovely day in Lethbridge today. We hit the double digits. Actually, we got to higher than what our expected high was of 9. We got up to about 11 degrees. It was a bit windy, though. We were predicting some rain today. That precipitation could actually come later on this evening, overnight. We are expecting a low of -2. We could see those showers, possibly even some flurries overnight. Into Wednesday, though, partly cloudy skies. There's those double digits again, 11 degrees the high. Into Thursday, we're looking at a high of 16 degrees. Should be a lovely sunny day. Sunshine Friday as well. And look at that. We could see a possibility of a high of 20 degrees that day. Friday night, though, that's where it all kind of changes. The temperature will drop. We're going to see more precipitation. Showers expected Friday. Into Saturday, those showers could possibly turn to flurries. 7 degrees the high on Saturday, only 4 on Sunday, and 3 degrees on Monday. What is happening to our lovely spring? We are going from double digits down to single digits, but the almanac tells us that the average high for this time of year is 11 degrees, average low -3. 22 degrees was our high temperature on this day. That was back in 1969 right there. Back in 1975, we had our lowest day, lowest temperature on this day, which was -21. 7 a.m., that's when the sun rose this morning, and our sun set this evening just after 8 o'clock. We're looking at 8:08 p.m. for our sunset this evening. Let's take a look at the West Coast tomorrow. Going to see some windy conditions in Victoria, particularly in the Juan de Fuca Strait, looking at 80 km/h winds, 11 degrees the high there, 12 degrees the high in Vancouver with partly cloudy skies. Could feel a little bit windy by the water, 7 degrees the high in Edmonton with sunny skies, and a mix of sun and cloud tomorrow in Calgary with a high of 10 degrees. As we look to the rest of the prairies, Saskatoon going to have some rain. Then the rain could develop into some flurries later on in the day. 5 degrees the high, 6 the high in Regina with partly cloudy skies. Looking at some rain in Winnipeg. Winnipeg, a high of 5 degrees, and also expecting some wind gusts up to about 70 km/h. So a bit windy in Winnipeg. Windy conditions also expected in the central part of the country tomorrow. 10 degrees the high in Toronto with rain. Sunshine in Ottawa tomorrow, high of 15 degrees, and 12 degrees in Montreal. Should be lovely there other than some windy conditions. 10 the high in Fredericton tomorrow. Same thing for Halifax. Beautiful sunny skies in those cities. Should be lovely. 2 the high in Saskatoon. We're talking Charlottetown, wrong part of the country there. And rain, there it is. There's the precipitation on the East Coast. I knew it was in there somewhere. Rain mixed with flurries with a high of 3 degrees in St. John's, Newfoundland tomorrow. So there you go. That is your forecast. The Bank of Canada's latest Business Outlook survey, which tracks business sentiment in the first quarter of the year, says Canadian companies expect it will take 3 years for inflation to return to the central bank's 2% target. The report also revealed that the numbers of businesses navigating supply chain challenges is at a record high. Approximately half of the Canadian businesses surveyed also expect to face upward cost pressures tied to higher energy and commodity prices due to the war in Ukraine. The report also found Canadian companies expect strong sales growth in 2022, but at a mere moderate pace compared to last year. Calgary-based energy company Suncor says it's divesting its wind and solar assets. The company says it still intends to be net zero emissions by 2050, but will accelerate progress towards that target by focusing on hydrogen and renewable fuels instead. Suncor says it's developed 8 wind power projects since 2002 in 3 provinces: Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Ontario. It says efforts to hit the 2050 net zero goal also include accelerating commercial scale deployment of carbon capture technology. The Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver says home sales picked up between February and March, but are still down from a year ago. The BC Board says last month's sales totaled 4,344, which is a 27% increase from 3,424 homes sold in February, and a 24% decrease from the 5,708 sales recorded in March of 2021. Board Chair Daniel John says the numbers indicate the market is experiencing a much calmer pace than it saw last year, but activity and prices remain elevated. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 154 points to 21,930. The Dow was down 280 points to 34,641. The S&P 500 was down 57 points to 4525, and the Nasdaq was down 328 points to 14,204. West Texas Intermediate oil was down 230 to 198 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 38 cents to 609 US. Gold was down a penny to 1923.59 US an ounce, and silver was even at 24.32 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at 13.60 per bushel. Barley is at 9.69. Canola 25.42, and corn is at 11.89 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1.20 to 136.80. Feeder cattle were down $2.25 to 156.13. Lean hogs were down $1.78 to 97.67, and the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 80.07 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says he expects more atrocities to come to light in Ukraine as Russian troops continue to retreat from areas around Kyiv. More grisly evidence is emerging of massacres in areas that Russian forces recently withdrew from. NATO allies are working with Ukraine to gather more information about civilian deaths. Up next, with the Trudeau government under pressure to increase defense spending due to the conflict in Ukraine, how much of it will be included in Thursday's federal budget announcement? We chat about all of that right after the break with federal political correspondent Brian Lilly. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. The Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization is looking for volunteers to take part in their Drive Happiness program. This program is to help seniors in our community who are facing extreme loneliness due to lack of accessible transportation. Volunteers will drive clients to their medical appointments, pick up groceries, and take them to important life activities. If you're interested in this opportunity and for more information, call 403-332-4320 or email volunteer@volunteerlethbridge.com. Lethbridge Legal Guidance is a nonprofit society offering free legal advice to low-income Southern Albertans. It holds clinics on Tuesdays from 4 to 6 p.m. by appointment only. Some of the areas the society assists in include family, criminal, traffic, immigration, EI, and other issues. For more information, call 403-380-6338 or visit their website, lethbridgelegalguidance.ca. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Well, a lot happening in federal politics this week. The Conservative leadership race continues to move forward. Trudeau's government will be releasing the federal budget this week. And could the feds make a third vaccine mandatory? Well, here to discuss it all is our federal political correspondent and Toronto Sun columnist, Brian Lilly. Brian, thanks so much for joining me once again today. Great to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Brian, the federal budget will be released this Thursday. And even though we have a Liberal government, you're calling this Canada's first federal NDP budget. Why is that?
It was a little while ago, one of my colleagues at Postmedia, John Ivison, said that Justin Trudeau has become the first NDP prime minister in Canadian history. And that was before the coalition agreement with Jagmeet Singh. And he said that because Justin Trudeau has been moving his party, his Liberal Party, away from the center where the Liberals normally sit, more towards NDP-style territory. Well, now that they have this deal with the NDP, we know that there's going to be an awful lot of spending in areas like trying to establish a national pharmacare program, a national dental care program, trying to solidify the childcare agreements. Essentially, they're going to be a federal budget that's mostly about provincial jurisdiction and social programs. That's going to be an awful lot of it, which really makes it more of an NDP type budget than any Liberal budget I've ever covered in the past. And I've covered about 20 odd of them over the last 22 years. And this is going to be the most distinctive in terms of how the Liberals have operated in that time.
It should be interesting, should be historical. Now, you mentioned the coalition. So while there's been a lot written for and against this NDP Liberal coalition, the latest public opinion poll shows that most Canadians do actually support this. So does that surprise you, Brian?
It surprises me how high the support is. About 63% say, yeah, I'm good with this. Now, it's not a question of, is it legal, is it illegal? Of course, it's legal for parties to do this. In fact, in our system, whoever is prime minister is the person who has the confidence of the most MPs in the House of Commons. that could be someone who draws support from any number of parties. So yes, it's legal to do this, but does it sit well with them? Well, 63%, according to the latest Ipsos poll, say that yeah, they're fine with it. Now, will it be good for the country and will it lead to good policy? That's a different story. See, 63% is higher than the NDP and Liberal vote combined. About a quarter of Conservatives say they're good with this deal. Maybe they just like the stability. We don't know. But when they're asked again, okay, will it lead to good or bad public policy decisions by the government? That's when things change. And at that point, 52% say this will be good for the country. That's just about a point or so higher than the combined vote of the Liberals and the NDP. 48%, though, say, no, this is going to be bad for the country. So that reflecting, of course, the Bloc and the Conservative and the Green voters on that side. So it is a split in terms of, yeah, I'm okay with the deal, but Canadians are divided on whether it's good for the country.
Now, Brian, you think this will be another big spending budget with another whopper of a deficit. So isn't that just driven by spending on COVID and falling government revenue during this time?
Well, that's been a lot of the narrative over the last couple of years as you look at government spending. The last deficit announced in the 2021 budget, I believe it was somewhere around 380 odd billion. The year before, it had been about 360 billion. That's for the deficit. But about 100 billion or more, well, actually just more than $100 billion in each of those years, had nothing to do with COVID. It was extra spending not related to the pandemic. And when you look at the government's regular fiscal updates, they're actually have been bringing in more money than they did before the pandemic. So government revenues aren't down. Are they enough to keep up with the pandemic spending? No. But as I said, about a third of the deficit spending wasn't related to the pandemic. The Trudeau Liberals are committed to going on with stimulus spending, even as the Bank of Canada, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, bank economists elsewhere are saying that the economy is actually moving along and doesn't need the stimulus spending. One of the worries is that will lead to extra inflation. We're already dealing with the problem of inflation. Everyone sees prices going up at the grocery store, the gas station, housing, everything. Well, if the government is putting more money into the system, that could drive more inflation. That could lead to the Bank of Canada saying, oh, we've got to stop inflation now, so we're going to hike interest rates. So then your mortgage gets more expensive. Maybe your line of credit gets more expensive. So there's a lot at play and a lot at stake here. But I don't expect them to bring down spending in any dramatic way, even as they try and wean people off the COVID support measures that most Canadians would say needed to be in place during periods of lockdown and economic slowdown.
Now, Brian, of course, the world's eyes have been on Ukraine. The Trudeau government, of course, has been under pressure to increase defense spending due to that conflict in Ukraine. So should we expect to see that on Thursday as well?
I think we will see that, and the government has been telegraphing that in some of their budget leaks. As I mentioned earlier, I've been at this a long time, and you watch the leaks and who they go to and where they go, and Canada's place in the world was leaked out as one of the themes of this budget. That will entail, we're told, some increase in defense spending. Now, here's what you have to watch for. Will it be immediate increases in spending, or will it be over the next 10 years, the government of Canada will spend X number of dollars on defense, and then you look and it's all back-ended in years 7, 8, 9, and 10. I wouldn't be surprised to see that sort of thing. But there have also been signals that the government is prepared to finally whip out some fighter jets, as Justin Trudeau once said, and they're going to look at buying the F-35 more than a decade later than the federal government should have, but they have said they're going to do it. So watch for how quick the spending will take place, where it takes effect. Is it on the infrastructure and equipment and the people that the military needs, or is it in some feel-good measures that are more in line with the direction this government's going, which is not military strength, but diplomatic measures disguised as military spending?
Now, keeping with the budget, so one of the themes of this budget will be the green economy. So there's a major oil and gas project waiting for approval. Will that project get the green light, you think?
I'm really not sure. This is the Bay du Nord oil and gas project off of the coast of Newfoundland, and it would be the biggest deep water drilling expedition in Canadian history. This is a major project, but when you look at how the government has treated the Alberta oil patch, for example, not very well. You look at even how they treated the proposal for Energy Saguenay, which would have taken natural gas from Western Canada, run it through a pipeline to Quebec to establish a deep sea export terminal to send Canadian gas out of Quebec to Europe. It would have been a boon to Quebec. They still turned that down. So I'm not sure that they're going to approve it. On the other hand, you look at how they're able to say that they're doing well. Part of it is, well, the price of oil is up. We know that helped the Alberta government balance its books very quickly. The federal government doesn't do as well when the price of oil is up, but they do see increased revenue. And so will they look at this Bay du Nord project and say, you know what, times are good right now for us, we should approve this project and move forward with it? Or are they going to stick with their green blinders on and say no to it? I would lean towards them saying no to that project. This is a government that has come out with their climate plan and said it will be illegal to buy a gas-powered vehicle by just over a decade from now. Look, the world's moving towards electric vehicles, and we see that not just due to government mandates, but consumer choice as well. And if you've been to the pumps lately, you know why.
Yeah, exactly.
But this government goes beyond that. So, I think it'll be ideological.
That was a very ambitious plan of theirs, too. Brian, let's talk about vaccines for a minute here. So the federal government is talking about changing the definition of fully vaccinated for COVID-19 to include a third dose. So is that for all Canadians or just for their employees?
At this point, just their employees. And it's important to note where this is coming from. It's not coming from Public Health Canada. It's not coming from Dr. Tam. It's not coming from NACI, the Advisory Committee on Immunization. It's coming from Treasury Board. Treasury Board is the government department that's in charge of the public service. And of course, we know that the Trudeau Liberals promised in the last election they would mandate all staff had to be vaccinated, even working from home. Well, now they're saying they might mandate a third dose. They've said that they will announce this by later in the week. The public sector unions already talking about it, already bracing for it. Does that mean that you, if you're not a federal worker, will have to get a third dose? I look at what local and provincial public health officers across the country have said. Here in Ontario, our Dr. Moore was asked about that, and he said he's not moving in that direction, and for some solid reasons. Even if you're fully backing the idea of getting your third booster, he said there's too many people who have 2 doses, but who've also had Omicron lately. Now, if you'd have Omicron, you shouldn't be getting your third dose for 6 months. So if you make 3 doses fully vaccinated, you're going to exclude them even though they've got protection because they also had an infection. So there are medical reasons not to go in this direction. But again, this is a government often driven by ideology rather than facts.
Interesting. Okay. Now, Brian, the Conservative leadership race continues to move forward, of course. Candidate Leslyn Lewis is the first to submit all paperwork and get on the ballot there. But Brian, you're saying that Pierre Poilievre is looking like a true front runner who might be the hard one to beat. So why are you saying that?
Just the crowd size. I mean, congratulations to Leslyn Lewis, and I think she'll do well. She surprised a lot of people in the last election campaign. She was the first to get the 500 signatures, I believe it is, and $300,000 into the party. But she is drawing good-sized crowds. Any standard leadership race, those would be great sized crowds. But Pierre Poilievre is drawing crowds of 1,000 in Ottawa, 1,200 for a noontime rally in Windsor, Ontario. He's going to British Columbia later this week and then Alberta next week. And I'm expecting big crowds again when you're consistently seeing in big cities and small towns, hundreds, if not more than 1,000 people coming out for his rallies. You have to wonder if he's clicked onto something. Now, the important part is for him and his campaign, is he turning those into memberships? Because he could have 1,000 people at every rally. If he doesn't sell them memberships and then get them out to vote, it's all for naught. And the other guys could be having smaller rallies, but selling memberships and getting people out to vote. That's how you win. It's not crowd size. but that is an indication that he's doing very well. And my understanding is that, yeah, he is converting a good number of the people coming out into new members. And if he's able to deliver them, given the crowd sizes that we're seeing, this might be a walk away come September when they announce it. But that's a long way out. Candidates have until April 19th to register, and people have until June 3rd to buy a membership to vote for the candidate of their choice. Voting will take place by mail over the summer.
That's those deadlines coming close for sure. Should be interesting to see what unfolds there. Now, Brian, the federal Liberals have introduced a new bill that would see tech giants like Google and Facebook be forced to pay for the news content that they use. So how would that work?
They're trying to follow a bit of the Australian model tailored for Canada, and that would see an arbitration system go forward where, whether it's Bridge City News or the Toronto Sun, where, I have my day job, it is saying, look, if you are using the news content of these organizations, then you have to give them some of the ad revenue that you're getting from dealing and posting in their material. There's been long been a cry from news media organizations across the country that Google and Facebook, or now called Meta, Facebook and Instagram together, they've changed their corporate name, that they suck up a lot of the digital and online ad revenue. And a lot of it is based on content created by other companies, and that revenue should be shared. There have been attempts at trying to negotiate a settlement between news organizations and these companies. That hasn't happened. What the Liberals are proposing now is a lot less heavy-handed than what had been proposed before. The former Heritage Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, wanted to get in there and have government regulate absolutely every part of it. This is saying, okay, we're going to force you to come together. If there is no agreement, we'll bring one forward, but we need you to work together to sort this out. So it's probably a good thing. News organizations want this. Google and Facebook are not opposed to it necessarily, but they want to make sure that it's done in the right way. So we'll see this play out over the next little while and see if it helps with the future of journalism.
Okay, well, Brian, thanks so much for joining us once again. It looks like we are out of time, but we always appreciate having you on. Brian Lilly, federal political correspondent and columnist for the Toronto Sun. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.
A new local business venture here in Lethbridge has set up an analytics lab at the University of Lethbridge. The president and CEO had noticed that agricultural analysis work was being sent to Calgary, and this observation led Ross Tisdale to create Blue Sky Analytical Labs. The company has already won the new Business of the Year award from the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce. Ross Tisdale joins me now via Zoom from the Science Commons at the University of Lethbridge campus. Ross, welcome to Bridge City News. So great to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeanette.
What was it that caused you to see the need for an analytics lab in Southern Alberta? Maybe explain also what an analytics lab is exactly.
Sure. In essence, what we do is we analyze samples. So customers will send us samples from everything from water to cannabis, and we will run it through equipment, do some work related to chemistry and biology, and essentially tell them what the contents of that sample is.
Okay, interesting. So your company is enhancing the productivity and profitability of local agriculture operations too. Maybe explain that a little bit.
Sure. Yes and no. There's certain things that are regulatory. So for example, with the cannabis business, every time a producer grows a crop, they need to have it analyzed for safety before it can be sold on the market. So things like testing for pesticides, THC potency, things along those lines, it all needs to be tested before it can be available on the market.
Okay, interesting. So how is it that your business was able to collaborate with the U of L? That's so interesting.
Yeah, I worked in a previous role as project manager of IT at the university here. And our vice president and co-founder, Luke Roberts, he's a PhD student here right now, and he'll be finishing his PhD probably early next year.
Okay, so how long ago did this collaboration take place, and when did you start the company?
It's been about 2 years in the making to get us to where we are now. And it was a lot of putting together a proposal to present to the administration of the university. And it lined up really well with just leveraging underutilized equipment that was here on campus. And so just trying to put a need purpose to something that was already there, it was already existing infrastructure, and to just try to leverage it properly.
Okay,
And
well,
so essentially we put that agreement together, pitched it to the university, and yeah, they were very helpful and happy to start working with us.
okay, well, that's kind of cool. So how much lab analysis work was leaving our region before your company was set up?
Almost all of it. There is one other laboratory in town, Down to Earth Labs, and they deal primarily with soil sampling. And even some of the tests that they do go up to Calgary just because it's not exactly their focus. So anything outside of that was going to Calgary. And it seems like with Lethbridge, with the size of our city, there's a few things like that that people were just used to relying on larger city centers for that. And you know, we feel that there's more than enough demand in Southern Alberta for us to have a dedicated laboratory in our region to things outside of soil sampling.
Yeah, no, exactly. So it sounds like your company is starting to make a big impact on the local area. So can you maybe tell us a bit about the economic impact of your lab facility?
Well, certainly. So there is a fairly large amount of producers in Alberta, and whenever they're having their cannabis analyzed, there are a few labs in Alberta, but a lot of the work is going out to Ontario. And from our understanding, there is not a lab in Alberta that can do the entire Health Canada suite of required tests in-house. There's particularly the pesticides portion of it requires some very specialized equipment. And so we happen to have that here on campus. And so with that, we should be the only laboratory in all of Alberta that can do that entire Health Canada suite of tests. And so having that local, of course, it means keeping revenue in our local economy here, but it also means for faster turnaround times for companies, which of course, the logistics of just being closer also means for a reduction in costs.
Okay, probably a lot of people don't really know what all goes into cannabis production. Maybe you can explain it a little bit.
But when it comes to the analysis of it, we use some very specialized equipment such as mass spectrometry. We've got ICP-MS, which is an intercoupling plasma mass spectrometer. We've got UHPLC, an HPLC. There's quite a few different pieces of equipment that we have here. We operate out of the core analytical facility in the New Science Commons building. And so there's a lot of equipment that's required to do all the tests that the products need to have done in order to be sold in the market.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and it all has to have that Health Canada stamp of approval. What is it that you are analyzing? What is it you're looking for or not looking for?
So, yeah, a lot of it has to do with safety. And so a really good example is the pesticides. So we need to validate that there are no pesticides on the product because, of course, it'll be harmful to the consumer. So there's 96 different pesticides that we test for. Aside from that, we're looking for the potency. You know, if you look on the label of any cannabis product that you'll buy, there's THC and CBD percentages on there. It'll show THC-A and just THC, which interestingly enough, it has to do with a reaction that happens when the cannabis is heated. And so it converts the THC from THC to THC-A. And so if you look at the label, you'll see two percentages on there, one quite low and one quite high. And that is the THC and THC-A after it's been heated up.
Okay, it does sound very analytical and very sciencey. So you're in the university. So what about the students at the U of L? Have you been able to hire graduates from there?
It's almost serendipitous how it's formed, because really the three most critical factors that we need to run this business, we just naturally found. And that is chemistry with Jackson Knott, with his master's in chemistry, and microbiology, which Luke brings in, getting his PhD, and then of course the business side of it, which I'm just finishing up my MBA right now. And so, with the business, the chemistry, and the microbiology, particularly for the requirements of the cannabis testing, that is exactly what's needed. And so to have the three of us come together and really enjoy working together and enjoy what we're doing, to be able to have all the required skills with such a small team has just been absolutely amazing. And we've got plans to hire more students for some database programming work as well as some market analysis work. So it's very important for us on campus to be integrated into the community here. And so we really, it's a mutually beneficial relationship that we have here. So we really want to give back as much as we're benefiting from our place on campus here. So working with students and supporting the students is very important to us.
That is really amazing that you're just kind of incorporating all those students from all these different, sciences. It's amazing. And who would have thought that something like that would be so sciencey? But there you go. You guys are the smart ones for sure. So we know that universities are great at developing collaborations. So how about on the local business side? Are there any businesses here that you've been able to forge a business relationship with?
Certainly. I mean, I've already mentioned Down to Earth Labs. So we're in the works of doing some sample work with them. Bridge Bud Supply, we're very good friends with them. And so they've got quite a few retail stores in Southern Alberta. And certainly outside of that, we've had a lot of businesses reaching out and looking for testing outside of cannabis too. Though cannabis is our focus, we do water testing, and we offer just general science consulting for some of the questions that people might not even know what to ask. And we've had quite a few people reach out to us with some interesting things. So absolutely, we're more than happy to collaborate with any local business that has analytical needs.
Yeah. What are some of the more interesting ones that you've been approached with?
Most of it is cannabis-based, but there are a lot of food manufacturers as well. And so PIP International is an example of one company that's reached out to us. But with the food processing, of course, there needs to be regular tests done to ensure the safety of the products. And so the microbial aspect of that is quite important when it comes to food manufacturing, looking for E. coli, coliform, yeast, salmonella, things like that. And so that's a service that we offer as well.
Okay, amazing. And if somebody wanted to send something to you to be analyzed, can a private consumer or can a private person do that? Or does it have to be a business? Do you charge for this? How does it work?
We would absolutely work with any individual. And yes, it is a service that we charge for. We are a private company. So absolutely, we'd be happy to work with home growers, for example. So it's not only large businesses that we're dealing with, but if someone is growing some cannabis plants in their house and they're just curious of the potency, THC percentages, we'd be happy to work with them on that.
Okay, interesting. So we know who your main customers are at this time, but where do you see your business focusing on in the future?
The focus will continue to be cannabis, but we want to just expand our services as much as possible. One of the things that we're doing outside of the normal Health Canada regulated suite of tests is we work with NMR as well, which is nuclear magnetic resonance. And whenever there's companies that are synthesizing things, they need to verify the actual molecular structure of the product that they're making. And that's where the NMR equipment comes in. And it's a very, very interesting installation of equipment. It's not just something that goes on a benchtop. It's really part of the building and the infrastructure here in Science Commons. And it's quite amazing to be working with that.
Mm-hmm. Now, you recently won the new Business of the Year award from the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce. Congratulations on that, by the way. What does this tell you about the desire for diversification of industry in our region?
I think, again, it has to do with, the awareness that Southern Alberta has enough demand that the variety of businesses can be housed here. But as we've just gotten comfortable with relying on larger city centers, the supply of some of those unique businesses hasn't met the demand because we've just been so familiar with sending things up to Calgary or Edmonton. And so I think that that's one of the greatest things to see is some of the diversity in the businesses that are growing in our region. And we're so happy to be a part of that. It was absolutely wonderful to be recognized by the Chamber for the work that we're doing.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And congratulations once again, by the way. So some people, when they think cannabis, their mind is still going back to, like an illegal substance, which it is legal now. Maybe talk about that. Have you seen sort of a paradigm shift in the way that people think about it now, or in the community? Is it looked at more as almost like a glass of wine now? What are you seeing that's changing?
I think there's certainly a shift with that. I mean, the fact of going from it being a criminal activity to not a criminal activity, there's a large change. Of course, there's going to be stigmas that stick around for some time, but I think that it's something that will just continue to change and people will continue to get more comfortable with it as it just becomes more of a normally accepted thing, similar to having a glass of wine, like you mentioned.
All right. Well, Ross Tisdale of Blue Sky Analytical Labs, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.